Okay, now we have another cosine graph that we have to graph, and this time there are four things. All four things are changing in the cosine graph. So we're going to see what's different between this one and sine. If you have the worksheet number 2, this is problem number 8 on that worksheet, or it may be renumbered, but it's in the worksheet, so you should be able to find it. Alright, so first we're going to identify what the changes are, and then we'll graph it. So amplitude is the number in front, that's a 5, so it's going to be stretched taller vertically. Period, I'm going to set whatever is with my theta or with my x equal to the normal period length of cosine. Normal period length of cosine is 2 pi. So I'm going to solve for x times 2 over 1 times 2 over 1. So my new period is going to be 4 pi. Okay? So it's going to take a lot longer to get through my one cycle. It's kind of double the length to get through one cycle instead of normal 2 pi. Okay. Next I'm going to do my phase shift, which is where I take my whole parentheses and set it equal to 0. When the period changes, it is no longer just this value for your phase shift. So I'd always just set everything in parentheses equal to 0 to solve for your phase shift. Okay. So I'm going to add my pi over 6 over, okay, times by 2 over 1 again. So my phase shift is going to be pi over 3, right, if I simplify this. So my new phase shift is pi over 3, so I moved it to the right, pi over 3. Also, you can call it positive pi over 3. Alright, last thing to identify is my vertical shift, which I'm moving down 6, or negative 6, will be my phase shift, or my vertical shift, sorry. Alright, so it's going to move to the right, pi over 3. It's taking longer to finish the cycle. It's moved down 6, and it's going to be stretched taller by 5. So let's start with the period and the phase shift. We're going to start addressing those two things by labeling our horizontal axis. We're going to start labeling where our phase shift is, so pi over 3. Okay, so instead of starting at 0, my graph has been shifted to the right, pi over 3. That's why we start labeling there. To find where I end my cycle, I'm going to take the phase shift plus the period length. The distance between the start and the end must be the period length. So my phase shift was pi over 3. My new period was 4 pi. Let's change that into a fraction. So that's going to be 12 pi over 3. Okay, so if I add those together, I'll get 13 pi over 3 is where I'm going to end my cycle and where I'm going to end my labeling. Alright, so the next part is to find this middle value. A lot of times this is where we're struggling, is to find the intervals. So to find the intervals, I'm going to take the average of the start and the end. Okay? And we're going to forget about the pi. So normally it was pi over 3. I'm just going to call it 1/3. Plus my end is 13 pi over 3. Forget about the pi. This is 14 over 3. And now I want to divide this in half. Right? I divide by 2. When I'm doing the average, I add the numbers together, divide by how many numbers there are. Well, dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2. Okay? So now I'm going to have 14 over 6. If I simplify that a little bit more, that would be 7 over 3. And I'm just going to stick a pi next to it. So that is the middle interval, 7 pi over 3. So if you take the average, that's how you can find those. 7 pi over 3. Okay? So you can do the same thing to find the next ones. They all need to be the same distance in between. So this will be 4 pi over 3. 7 pi over 3. Notice they're increasing by 3 pi over 3 every time. So this would be 10 pi over 3. Alright, so we have taken care of the period and the phase shift by those labels. Next thing I'm going to do is the amplitude. Okay, so I'm going to first of all draw a normal cosine graph. Okay, normally it starts out at 1, here, here. Okay, so I'm going to do that in black. That's my normal cosine without changing the amplitude or the vertical shift. So now we're going to address the amplitude, which is going to be at 5. And it's going to be down here, -5. Okay, so amplitude's like a multiplier. So I'm going to take each of my original cosine y values and multiply it by 5. So 1 multiplied by 5 is at 5. 0 multiplied by 5 is 0. -1 times 5 is -5. 0 times 5 is still 0. 1 times 5 is 5. So now my green graph is addressing the amplitude. Okay, last thing we need to do is the vertical shift. Everything has been moved down 6. I'm going to erase some of this stuff so our graph can not be quite as messy. Okay. So our vertical shift, everything is moved down. So I'm going to extend this down here. Because I know my lowest one, -5 minus 6 more is going to be at -11. So I'm going to have to move that down there. Okay. So if I have, this may be up to your teacher how you've done vertical shifts. You've either physically moved them or you've relabeled. Either way is okay. So I'm going to do our final graph in red. So 5 minus 1 brings me down to -1. It's always a good idea just to label everything in case it's not to scale. As long as we see your labeling, then we can go with it. 0 minus 6 is going to be a -6, which we'll call that down here. Okay. Here we are green, we're at -5 minus 6, it takes me to -11. From this 1 minus 6, I'm at -6. +5 minus 6 gives me down to -1. So the red is going to be our final graph. Making sure you have the correct intervals. You start at pi/3 and at 13 pi/3, and everything's been moved down. It's up to you if you'd like to do it all at once. It may be a lot to handle as this is a newer concept. But so if you have questions, make sure you're asking your teacher.